Marcus Chen watched his son Tommy kick the soccer ball across their small yard on New Haven Colony. The 12-year-old boy laughed as their dog Rex chased after the ball, his blonde hair catching the artificial sunlight from the dome overhead. It was a perfect moment, one that Marcus would replay in his mind countless times in the dark days ahead. "Dad, watch this," Tommy called out, attempting a fancy trick shot that sent the ball sailing over the fence into their neighbor's garden. The Zephyrian family next door had 3 children of their own, and they often played together despite the language barriers. Marcus smiled and waved from the porch where he sat with his coffee, appearing to any observer as nothing more than a simple maintenance worker, enjoying his day off. The illusion was perfect. For 5 years, he had been just another human refugee on this backwater colony world, keeping his head down and raising his son in peace. The Galactic Empire had expanded rapidly over the past century, absorbing world after world with promises of prosperity and protection. Both species joined willingly, drawn by advanced technology and trade opportunities. Humans were among the latest additions, their homeworld Earth having been liberated just 15 years ago. The Empire claimed they were saving humanity from their own destructive tendencies. New Haven Colony was supposed to be a fresh start for displaced humans and other species. The marketing materials showed happy families living in harmony under Imperial protection. What they didn't mention were the surveillance drones that constantly patrolled the streets, or the way certain humans simply disappeared when they asked too many questions about the war back on Earth. Marcus had chosen this place specifically because it seemed insignificant, a farming colony on the edge of Imperial space, populated mostly by refugees and workers who just wanted to live quiet lives. The Empire barely paid attention to places like this, which made it perfect for someone who needed to stay invisible. But invisibility was becoming harder to maintain. The Empire's policies toward humans had been gradually shifting over the past few years. What started as protective oversight was becoming something more sinister. Humans were being relocated to safer districts that looked suspiciously like ghettos. Their children were being enrolled in mandatory education programs that seemed designed to erase human culture and history. Tommy burst through the back door, grass stains on his knees, and a huge grin on his face. "The Zephyrian kids want to know if I can come to their cultural festival tomorrow." "Can I, Dad, please?" Marcus ruffled his son's hair, noting how the boy had grown several inches over the past year. Soon he would be a teenager, full of questions about why they lived so simply when other families seemed to have more. Tommy already asked why they moved so often, why they never talked to Earth, and why his father worked such ordinary jobs despite obviously being educated. "We'll see, buddy. Go wash up for dinner." As Tommy ran upstairs, Marcus's expression hardened slightly. He pulled out his tablet and checked the news feeds, something he did obsessively despite knowing it would only bring bad news. The headlines confirmed his fears. Another human settlement had been relocated for their safety after reports of terrorist activity. The pattern was always the same. A few humans would speak out against Imperial policies. There would be an incident, and then entire communities would disappear into the Empire's vast bureaucracy. Marcus had seen this playbook before. He had helped write parts of it, back when he wore a different name and served the Empire's interests. Before he learned what the Empire really thought of species like humanity, before he discovered that humans weren't being saved, they were being slowly eliminated. The next morning started like any other. Marcus kissed Tommy goodbye as the boy headed off to school with his backpack and lunchbox. The local school was integrated with human children learning alongside young Zephyrians, Andromedans, and other species. It was one of the things Marcus actually liked about New Haven, the way the children all played together regardless of their origins. He went to work at the water treatment facility, a job that kept him busy and provided good cover. His co-workers knew him as a quiet man who did good work and minded his own business. They had no idea that he could have designed more efficient systems than the ones he maintained, or that he understood Imperial technology better than most engineers. The call came at 2:47 in the afternoon. Marcus was adjusting a filtration system when his communicator buzzed with an emergency signal from the school. His blood turned to ice as he listened to the automated message reporting an incident that required all parents to come immediately. Marcus ran the 12 blocks to the school, his heart hammering in his chest. A crowd of parents had gathered outside, being held back by Imperial security forces. Through the chaos, Marcus spotted Mrs. Valenti, one of the human teachers, being loaded into a detention vehicle. Her face was bloodied and she was shouting something about protecting the children. A Zephyrian parent Marcus recognized grabbed his arm. "They came for the human children," she whispered urgently. "Said they were transferring them to special schools. The teachers tried to stop them, but—" Marcus pushed through the crowd, desperate to find his son. An Imperial officer stepped into his path, a Carthanian with the cold eyes of someone used to following orders without question. "Are you here for one of the human children?" the officer asked, consulting a tablet. "They've been relocated for enhanced education opportunities. You'll receive notification of visiting procedures within 10 business days." "Where is my son?" Marcus's voice was steady, but those who knew him well would have recognized the dangerous quiet that preceded violence. "The children are being processed at the regional center. Standard procedure for security purposes." Marcus felt something break inside his chest. Tommy wasn't just being relocated. He was being disappeared into the same system that had swallowed thousands of other human children. The Empire wasn't just conquering humanity. It was systematically destroying human families and culture. For 5 years, Marcus had been a ghost, a nobody who fixed water pumps and attended parent-teacher conferences. But before that, he had been something else entirely. Something the Empire had trained and then betrayed. Something they thought they had eliminated along with the rest of his unit. As he walked away from the school, Marcus Chen began to die. In his place, something much older and infinitely more dangerous began to wake up. The Empire had made the mistake of taking his son. Now they were going to learn why shadows were something to be feared. The safe house beneath Marcus's modest home had been sealed for 5 years. As he descended the hidden stairs, emergency lighting flickered to life, illuminating a space that belonged to a different world. Banks of quantum computers hummed quietly against the walls, their displays showing data streams from across the galaxy. Weapons that officially didn't exist hung in climate-controlled cases. Most importantly, a collection of identities and resources that could topple governments sat waiting in encrypted storage. Marcus pressed his palm against a scanner, and the central console awakened. For the first time in years, he spoke his real name aloud. Authorization: Commander James Reaper, Phantom Division, access code Delta 779. The computer's voice was crisp and emotionless. "Welcome back, Commander. All systems operational. Awaiting orders." James Reaper had been the Empire's most effective intelligence operative, the man they sent when problems needed to disappear completely. He had believed in the Empire's mission of bringing peace and order to the galaxy. He had eliminated threats to Imperial stability across dozens of worlds, convinced that he was protecting civilization itself, that faith had died 15 years ago on a space station orbiting Earth. James had been assigned to investigate reports of human resistance leaders planning terrorist attacks against Imperial facilities. What he found instead was evidence of something far more disturbing. The Empire wasn't just conquering humanity. It was conducting a careful study of human psychology, biology, and culture. The goal wasn't integration, but complete understanding of how to control or eliminate humans as a species. The resistance leaders he was supposed to capture turned out to be teachers, doctors, and artists who had discovered the truth about the Empire's plans. They weren't terrorists. They were parents trying to protect their children from systematic cultural genocide. James had tried to report his findings through proper channels, only to discover that his own commanders were part of the conspiracy. The Empire had decided that humans were too unpredictable, too willing to fight for abstract concepts like freedom and dignity. They would be slowly absorbed and their culture systematically erased. When James refused to eliminate the human terrorists, the Empire had tried to eliminate him instead. His entire unit had been declared rogue and hunted down across 3 star systems. One by one, his team members were captured or killed. James survived only because he was better at hiding than anyone else was at hunting. Now, as data streams flowed across his screens, James began to understand the scope of what had happened while he played at being a simple maintenance worker. The human relocations weren't random, they were systematic. Children were being separated from their parents and placed in educational facilities where they learned to be grateful Imperial citizens who happened to have human DNA but no human culture. Adult humans who showed signs of problematic thinking were disappearing into labor camps or research facilities. The Empire was particularly interested in human creativity and unpredictability, traits they wanted to study and ultimately eliminate from future generations. The regional processing center where Tommy had been taken was a fortress-like complex on the industrial moon of Kepler-7. According to Imperial records, it was a humanitarian facility, providing enhanced education for displaced children. According to the encrypted files James was now accessing through old intelligence networks, it was a research installation studying methods of psychological conditioning. James spent the night gathering intelligence and preparing resources. His fingers flew across keyboards as muscle memory returned, accessing systems he had helped design years ago. The Empire had changed many of their security protocols, but they had made the mistake of building on foundations James himself had created. By dawn, he had confirmed his worst fears. Tommy wasn't just being held at the facility, he was being used as a test subject. The researchers were particularly interested in children who had lived in integrated communities, studying how human cultural values could be systematically replaced with imperial ones. The facility was heavily guarded and located in one of the most secure sectors of imperial space. Any conventional rescue attempt would be suicide. Fortunately, James Reaper had never been conventional. His first target was Governor Malthus, the Andromedani administrator who oversaw human affairs in this sector. Malthus lived in a luxury complex on the capital world of Centauri Prime, surrounded by security systems and protected by Imperial Marines. He believed himself untouchable. James reached Centauri Prime by stowing away on a commercial transport, using identity documents that didn't officially exist. The governor was hosting a dinner party for other high-ranking officials, celebrating another successful relocation operation that had cleared 3 more human settlements. The party was in full swing when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, but Governor Malthus was already gone. His guests found him in his study, very much alive but completely paralyzed by a neural disruptor. A message was carved into his expensive wooden desk. You have 72 hours to release all human children from Kepler-7. Non-compliance will result in consequences. The governor's security chief, a veteran Carthanian warrior, scoffed at the threat. One terrorist cannot threaten the Empire. We'll increase security and hunt down this criminal. The second target was Admiral Vex, commander of the Imperial fleet responsible for enforcing the human relocations. She was attending a military review on the fortress world of Titan IX, inspecting new battle cruisers from the safety of an orbital station that was essentially a floating city. James infiltrated the station during a shift change, moving through maintenance corridors like a ghost. He had learned these techniques during his years of service, but now he was using them against his former masters. Admiral Vex was in her private quarters reviewing battle plans when she discovered she was no longer alone. "You're supposed to be dead," she said calmly, recognizing him despite the years that had passed. "The Empire tried to kill me," James replied, his voice carrying the weight of old betrayals. "Now I'm returning the favor. You cannot stop what we're doing. Humanity is being preserved, just in a more manageable form. You're erasing children's minds. You're destroying families, then we're preventing another war. Humans are too unpredictable to be allowed full autonomy." James left Admiral Vex alive but with a very clear message. The neural implant he placed at the base of her skull would broadcast her location to every criminal and terrorist organization in the galaxy. The Empire's most decorated naval commander would spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder. Word of the attack spread quickly through Imperial intelligence networks. The mysterious assassin was clearly a professional, someone with inside knowledge of Imperial security systems. More concerning was the precision of the operations, targeting specific officials responsible for human policies while leaving others untouched. Emperor Valdris himself called an emergency meeting of his inner council. The holographic projections of his most trusted advisors flickered in the secure chamber as they discussed the threat. "This isn't random terrorism," reported Intelligence Director Corval. "Someone is methodically targeting our human integration program. They know exactly which officials are involved and how to reach them." "Could this be a surviving member of Phantom Division?" asked the Emperor. "Impossible. We eliminated that entire unit years ago." But even as they spoke, James was already moving toward his next target. The Empire had taught him well, and now they were going to learn just how dangerous their former student had become. The Imperial Intelligence Directorate's headquarters on Nexus Station was considered impenetrable. Built into the hollow core of a massive asteroid, It housed the Empire's most sensitive operations and classified research. Director Corville himself had overseen its construction, ensuring that no unauthorized person could ever breach its defenses. James Reaper arrived as a maintenance worker, his forged credentials identifying him as a specialist in quantum computing systems. His appearance had been altered by cosmetic nanobots, and his biometrics were masked by technology the Empire didn't know existed. To every scanner and sensor, he appeared to be exactly who his documents claimed. The real maintenance worker was enjoying an unexpected vacation on a pleasure world, courtesy of an anonymous benefactor who had paid for a luxury cruise. He would never know that his identity had been borrowed to infiltrate the most secure facility in Imperial space. James spent 3 days mapping the facility's layout and security protocols. The research division was located in the deepest levels, where scientists studied ways to control and modify various species throughout the galaxy. The human research project was classified beyond top secret, known only to a handful of individuals. Dr. Zaris was the lead researcher on what was officially called the Human Integration Protocol. A Mendorian with 4 arms and compound eyes, she had spent decades studying the psychological structures that made different species useful to the Empire. Her work on humans was considered her masterpiece. According to the files James accessed, Dr. Zaris had developed techniques for systematically breaking down human cultural identity and rebuilding it around Imperial values. Children were particularly malleable subjects, their young minds easily reshaped through a combination of chemical conditioning and psychological manipulation. The process was refined to be humane by Imperial standards. The children weren't physically harmed, they simply forgot their human heritage and embraced their new role as loyal Imperial citizens. Their creativity and unpredictability were channeled into productive activities that served the Empire's interests. James found Dr. Zaris in her laboratory late at night, reviewing footage from the Kepler-7 facility. On her screens, dozens of human children were participating in what looked like educational activities. But James recognized the subtle signs of psychological conditioning, the carefully structured interactions designed to reshape developing minds. One of the children on screen was Tommy. Fascinating subjects, Dr. Zaris murmured as James materialized from the shadows behind her. Human children adapt so quickly once the proper parameters are established. You're torturing kids, James said quietly. I'm helping them. These children will grow up to be productive members of galactic society instead of dangerous rebels like their parents. She turned to face him, showing no fear. You must be the operative who's been causing so much trouble. We've been expecting you. James felt the trap closing around him. Emergency barriers slammed down, sealing the laboratory. Armed security forces poured in from hidden passages, weapons trained on him from multiple angles. Dr. Zaris smiled with all 4 arms crossed. Did you really think we wouldn't anticipate this? Your psychological profile predicted you would eventually attempt to rescue the child. We simply waited. The boy is useful leverage, added a new voice. General Kozak emerged from behind a security screen, his scarred face showing satisfaction. You're going to help us complete our research or watch your son's mind be systematically disassembled. James stood perfectly still as dozens of weapons stayed locked on his position. The security forces were professionals, maintaining proper spacing and covering all possible escape routes. Any conventional prisoner would have been helpless. You trained me well, James said, softly. The explosions began 30 seconds later. The Imperial Intelligence Directorate had been built to withstand external attacks. But no one had considered the possibility of internal sabotage by someone who understood the station's construction better than its current inhabitants. James had spent 3 days not just mapping the facility, but placing microcharges at critical structural points. As emergency alarms wailed and sections of the station began venting atmosphere, James moved with lethal precision. The security forces found themselves fighting not just one man, but a ghost who seemed to anticipate their every move. Their own tactics and procedures were being used against them by someone who had helped write the manual. General Kozak died first, taken down by a thrown blade that found the gap in his armor with surgical precision. Dr. Zaris lasted longer, but only because she barricaded herself in her laboratory. She was frantically trying to transmit her research data when James reached her. The children's conditioning can be reversed, she offered desperately. I can undo what we've done. I know, James replied. I read your files. The research facility's destruction sent shockwaves through the Imperial hierarchy. Decades of psychological research had been eliminated in a single night, along with some of the Empire's most valuable scientists. The message was clear. No one involved in the human program was safe. Emperor Valdris called another emergency session, this time with enhanced security protocols. The mysterious assassin was clearly a former Imperial operative, someone with intimate knowledge of their systems and training. We need to accelerate the timeline, declared Supreme Admiral Thorax. Eliminate all remaining human settlements before this terrorist can cause more damage. That would require extensive fleet redeployments, warned Admiral Vex, still nervously checking over her shoulder. We'd be vulnerable to attack from the Free Worlds Alliance. Better to face external enemies than allow internal ones to undermine our authority. But the Emperor was beginning to have doubts. The attacks were too precise, too well-informed. Someone with access to the highest levels of Imperial intelligence was systematically dismantling their human control program. There's something else, reported Intelligence Director Corval. We've detected unauthorized access to classified archives dating back 15 years. Someone has been reviewing files related to the Phantom Division. The room fell silent. The Phantom Division had been the Empire's most effective special operations unit, tasked with eliminating threats that conventional forces couldn't handle. Their methods had been so classified that even most Imperial officials didn't know they existed. All members of that unit were terminated, stated the Emperor. So we believed. But the access pattern suggests someone with commander-level clearance and intimate knowledge of our systems. Emperor Valdris felt a chill run down his spine. If a surviving member of the Phantom Division had gone rogue, the threat to the Empire was far greater than anyone had realized. These weren't ordinary soldiers but highly trained killers who knew the Empire's deepest secrets. Meanwhile, on a stolen transport ship heading toward Kepler-7, James reviewed the intelligence he had gathered. The facility where Tommy was being held was more heavily defended than he had initially thought. Rescue would require not just infiltration, but a full assault on one of the Empire's most secure installations. Fortunately, he wouldn't be going alone. The destruction of the research facility had sent a message to more than just Imperial officials. Throughout the galaxy, human resistance cells that had been lying dormant were beginning to stir. The systematic attack on Imperial facilities had given them hope that someone was finally fighting back. James began receiving coded messages from groups he had thought were long dead. Surviving members of Earth's defense forces, families who had lost children to Imperial relocations, even some non-human species who were beginning to question the Empire's true intentions. The Empire had made a critical mistake. By targeting his son, they had awakened not just one dangerous operative, but an entire network of people who had been waiting for someone to take the first shot. The real war was about to begin. The Kepler-7 research facility hung in space like a mechanical tumor against the stars, its dark hull bristling with defensive weapons and sensor arrays. To most observers, it appeared to be just another Imperial installation processing refugees. The truth was far more sinister. James drifted toward the facility in a modified stealth pod, his approach masked by debris from a recent asteroid mining operation. He had spent weeks planning this infiltration, studying guard rotations and supply schedules. But this wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. The intelligence he had gathered revealed that Kepler-7 was the prototype for facilities being constructed throughout Imperial space. Hundreds of human children were being held here, their minds systematically restructured to eliminate their cultural identity. The researchers had perfected techniques that could transform a proud human child into a grateful Imperial citizen within months. Tommy had already been here for 2 weeks. As James's pod attached to the facility's outer hull, he received a coded transmission from an unexpected source. Captain Sarah Hendricks had been a pilot in Earth's defense fleet, one of the few survivors of humanity's last stand. She was supposed to be dead, executed by Imperial forces years ago. Reaper, this is Ghost 7. We're in position and awaiting your signal. Through his tactical display, James could see 3 more stealth ships converging on the facility. Sarah had assembled a strike team of human survivors who had been living in the shadows, waiting for a chance to strike back. The destruction of the Imperial research facilities had convinced them that the time for hiding was over. Ghost 7, Confirm your target priorities, James transmitted. Primary objective is the children's containment level. Secondary is the research data cores. We're also detecting non-human children being held in adjacent sections. James paused. The intelligence reports had mentioned only human subjects, but it made sense that the Empire would be conducting similar experiments on other species. The psychological conditioning techniques being developed here could be used to control entire populations across the galaxy. Expand the mission parameters. We extract everyone. The assault began with surgical precision. James's pod deployed micro-drones that disabled the facility's outer sensor grid, while Sarah's team eliminated the patrol ships before they could raise an alarm. Within minutes, the facility's defensive perimeter had been compromised without anyone inside realizing they were under attack. James cut through the hull using molecular disruptors and slipped into the facility's maintenance corridors. The layout matched the intelligence he had stolen, but the reality was worse than the blueprint suggested. Through ventilation grates, he could see rows of cells containing children from dozens of different species. The human children were housed in a special section designed to look like a comfortable dormitory. They were being conditioned to believe they were at an educational facility where they were learning valuable skills for their future careers. The psychological manipulation was so subtle that most of them had no idea they were prisoners. James found Tommy in a classroom with 20 other human children, participating in what appeared to be a history lesson. The instructor, a Valdarian with pale blue skin and multiple eyes, was teaching them about the glorious expansion of Imperial civilization and how grateful they should be for Imperial protection. Before the Empire brought peace to the galaxy, many species fought terrible wars, the instructor explained. Humans were especially violent, destroying their own planet and threatening their neighbors. The Empire saved them from their destructive nature. Tommy raised his hand and James felt his heart stop. His son's eyes looked different, less focused somehow. Teacher, why were humans so violent? My memories of Earth are fuzzy, but I remember it being beautiful. Those aren't real memories, child. They're psychological artifacts left over from your traumatic experiences. The Empire's medical staff will help you process them properly. James clenched his fists, fighting the urge to burst into the classroom immediately. He needed to coordinate with Sarah's team to ensure all the children could be evacuated safely, but seeing his son's confused expression as his memories were systematically erased was almost unbearable. The strike team moved through the facility like ghosts, eliminating guards and disabling security systems. Sarah's people were professionals who had learned their skills fighting the Empire's occupation of Earth. They showed no mercy to the researchers and administrators who had been torturing children for scientific purposes. Reaper, we've secured the data cores, reported Lieutenant Martinez, another survivor of Earth's defense forces. The research files contained detailed psychological profiles of over 10,000 children from 40 different species. Download everything and prepare for extraction, James replied. I'm moving on the containment levels. The facility's command center was protected by elite Imperial guards, cybernetically enhanced soldiers who had been conditioned to feel no fear or mercy. They detected James's approach and moved to intercept him with mechanical precision. The battle was brief but intense. James had trained these same types of soldiers during his years of Imperial service, and he knew exactly how their conditioning worked. Their enhanced reflexes and tactical programming made them formidable opponents, but their inability to adapt or think creatively was their weakness. When the smoke cleared, James stood over the bodies of 6 Imperial guards while emergency alarms screamed throughout the facility. He had minutes before reinforcements arrived from the Imperial fleet base in the next system. The facility's commander was a Thoraxian named Zex who had built his career on the systematic suppression of resistance movements. He met James in the central control room, surrounded by the bodies of his staff. You're too late, Zex said calmly. The children have been conditioned beyond recovery. Even if you take them, they'll never be truly human again. Watch me, James replied. The extraction was a race against time. Sarah's team had secured transport ships and was loading hundreds of children of various species. But Imperial reinforcements were already jumping into the system. The facility's destruction would send a message, but only if they could escape to deliver it. As James reached the human containment section, he found Tommy and the other children huddled together in confusion. The alarms and explosions had shattered their carefully controlled environment, breaking through some of the psychological conditioning. "Dad?" Tommy said uncertainly, his eyes beginning to clear. "What's happening? Where are we?" James knelt beside his son, fighting back tears. "We're going home, buddy. We're going home." But even as he spoke, James could see the damage that had been done. Tommy's memories were fragmented, his personality subtly altered by weeks of psychological manipulation. The other children were in similar condition, their cultural identities partially erased. The rescue ships departed just as Imperial battlecruisers arrived in the system. Kepler-7 erupted in a series of explosions that lit up the dark side of the moon, taking with it years of research into controlling the minds of children. As they jumped to hyperspace, Sarah approached James in the transport's medical bay where Tommy was being examined. "The doctors say the conditioning can be reversed, but it'll take time," she reported. "Some of the damage might be permanent." James watched his son sleeping under medical scanners, noting the subtle changes in his facial expressions even in sleep. The Empire hadn't just imprisoned Tommy, they had tried to steal his humanity. "How many other facilities like this are there?" James asked. "According to the data we captured, at least 50 across Imperial space. They're planning to process every human child in the galaxy." James felt something cold and final settle in his chest. The Empire wasn't content to conquer humanity. They wanted to erase it entirely. They had declared war not just on human freedom, but on human existence. "Then we stop them all," he said quietly. "James, there are thousands of Imperial worlds and millions of soldiers. We're just a handful of survivors." "No," James corrected, looking out at the stars. "We're not just survivors anymore. We're the beginning of something much bigger." The word was already spreading across the galaxy through hidden networks and encrypted channels. The systematic attacks on Imperial facilities had inspired resistance movements on dozens of worlds. Species that had been quietly absorbed into the Empire were beginning to ask questions about what happened to their missing children and disappeared dissidents. The Empire had created their own worst enemy by trying to destroy a father's love for his son. Now that enemy was going to teach them why humanity had never been conquered by playing by the rules. The hidden base in the Void Nebula had once been a mining station abandoned after the ore deposits ran dry. Now it served as the headquarters for the growing human resistance, its corridors bustling with activity as survivors from across the galaxy arrived to join the fight. Tommy was recovering in the medical wing, his memories slowly returning as the Empire's conditioning was carefully reversed. The process was painful, involving both neural therapy and psychological counseling to help him distinguish between real experiences and implanted ones. Some days he remembered Earth clearly. Other days the false Imperial history seemed more real. James spent hours sitting beside his son's bed, watching him struggle with fragmented memories and conflicting emotions. The boy who had kicked soccer balls in their yard was still there, but he was changed. The innocence was gone, replaced by a quiet anger that worried James even as he recognized it. "I remember them telling us that humans started all the wars," Tommy said one afternoon, his voice small and confused. "But I also remember you reading me stories about human heroes who fought for freedom. Which is real?" "Both are real in different ways," James replied carefully. "Humans have done terrible things, just like every species. But we've also done beautiful things. The Empire wants you to remember only the terrible parts so you'll be ashamed of being human." The intelligence Sarah's team had, recovered from Kepler-7, painted a horrifying picture of the Empire's true intentions. The child conditioning program was just the beginning. Plans existed for systematic sterilization campaigns disguised as medical treatments, cultural artifacts being destroyed in the name of historical accuracy, and entire human colonies being relocated to reservations where they could be easily monitored and controlled. The Empire wasn't just conquering humanity, they were committing genocide in slow motion, but the resistance was growing faster than Imperial intelligence could track. The destruction of multiple research facilities had convinced other species that the Empire's benevolent facade was cracking. Zephyrian philosophers who had questioned Imperial cultural policies found their voices amplified by human survivors. Andromedani artists whose work had been censored began creating illegal broadcasts. Even some Imperial citizens were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions about what happened to species that resisted integration. James found himself reluctantly taking on a leadership role he had never wanted. His military expertise and knowledge of Imperial systems made him invaluable to planning operations. But every day spent organizing the resistance was a day not spent helping his son recover. "The Empire is adapting to our tactics," reported Captain Hendricks during their daily intelligence briefing. "They've moved most of their remaining research facilities to heavily defended systems and increased security around human populations. They're also accelerating their timeline," added Dr. Yates, a human psychologist who had escaped from an Imperial research program. "Intercepts suggest they're planning mass relocations within the next 6 months." James studied the tactical displays showing Imperial fleet movements across dozens of sectors. The Empire was shifting to a more aggressive stance, abandoning their careful propaganda campaigns in favor of direct action. They had decided that the human problem needed to be solved quickly before it inspired broader rebellion. "We need to change our approach," James announced. "We've been fighting like terrorists, hitting isolated targets and running away. It's time to fight like an army." The plan was audacious beyond belief. Instead of continuing to attack Imperial facilities, they would target the Empire's political structure directly. The annual Imperial Council meeting was scheduled to take place on Valdris Prime, the Empire's capital world. Every major leader and administrator would be present, including those responsible for the human extermination program. "You're talking about striking at the heart of Imperial power," Sarah said incredulously. "The security around the capital makes our previous targets look undefended." "That's exactly why it might work," James replied. "They'll expect us to hit another research facility or military base. They won't expect us to bring the war directly to their doorstep." The preparations took months. Resistance cells throughout the galaxy were activated, some for the first time since the Empire's conquest of their worlds. Weapons and supplies were smuggled through a network of sympathetic merchants and corrupt officials. Most importantly, intelligence assets within the Imperial government began providing detailed information about the council meeting's security arrangements. James was surprised to discover how many Imperial citizens had grown disillusioned with their government's policies. Administrators who had joined the Empire to bring peace and prosperity to the galaxy were horrified to learn about the systematic destruction of entire cultures. Scientists who thought they were studying alien psychology for peaceful purposes discovered they were developing tools for genocide. The inside information they provided revealed that the Empire's leadership was increasingly paranoid about the growing resistance. Security protocols had been tightened to the point where even loyal officials were beginning to chafe under the restrictions. As the operation's launch date approached, James spent what might be his final days with Tommy. His son was making remarkable progress, but the scars left by Imperial conditioning would take years to fully heal. The boy who emerged from the medical wing was harder than the child who had been taken, but he was undeniably human. "I want to come with you," Tommy announced one evening as they watched the stars through the observation deck windows. "Absolutely not," James replied immediately. "You're staying here where it's safe." "Safe?" Tommy's voice carried a bitter edge that hadn't been there before his capture. "Dad, they took me from school and tried to erase my mind. There is no safe anymore." James studied his son's face, seeing echoes of his own transformation from naive Imperial operative to hardened resistance fighter. The Empire had created another enemy by harming an innocent child, but this enemy was James's 12-year-old son. "This isn't your fight, Tommy." "Yes, it is. They didn't just hurt me. They hurt thousands of other kids, and they're going to keep doing it unless someone stops them." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent transmission from Dr. Yates. "James, you need to see this immediately. We've intercepted Imperial communications about something called Operation Final Solution." In the briefing room, the captured intelligence painted a picture worse than anyone had imagined. The Empire had decided that the human resistance was too dangerous to contain through conventional means. They were planning to eliminate all human settlements simultaneously, using biological weapons disguised as mandatory medical treatments. "The timeline has been moved up," Dr. Yates explained, her face pale. "They're launching the operation during the Imperial Council meeting. While all the leaders are celebrating their solution to the human problem, genocide protocols will be activated across hundreds of worlds." James felt the weight of millions of lives settling on his shoulders. The attack on Valdris Prime was no longer just about rescue or revenge. It was about preventing the complete extinction of humanity as a free species. "How long do we have?" he asked. 72 hours before the council meeting begins. The biological weapons are already in place, disguised as standard immunization programs. The resistance fleet was pitifully small compared to the Empire's vast military, but it included ships and crews from dozens of different species who had decided they could no longer stand by. While atrocities were committed in their name, Zephyrian merchants provided fast courier vessels, Andromedani engineers contributed stealth technology, and even some Imperial defectors brought military-grade weapons. As the fleet prepared to jump to Valdris Prime, James found himself suited up in combat armor for the first time in years. The equipment felt familiar, like putting on an old coat that still fit perfectly. But this time he wasn't fighting for the Empire's vision of order. He was fighting to ensure his son would grow up in a galaxy where being human wasn't a crime. Tommy appeared in the armory as James was checking his weapons, wearing a communications headset and carrying a data tablet. "I'm coordinating intelligence updates for the strike teams," the boy announced before his father could object. "Dr. Yates said I have a natural talent for pattern recognition." "Tommy, this isn't a game. People are going to die today." "I know." The boy's voice was steady, but James could see the fear in his eyes. "That's why we have to win." The attack on Valdris Prime began with a series of coordinated strikes across the planet's orbital defenses. Resistance fighters who had infiltrated the capital over previous months activated hidden weapons caches and sabotaged critical systems. The Empire's vaunted security apparatus found itself fighting enemies who knew their procedures better than they did. James led the assault on the Imperial Council chambers, moving through corridors he had once protected as a loyal operative. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was using skills the Empire had taught him to destroy the Empire itself. Emperor Valdris was in the middle of announcing the final solution to his assembled leaders when the chamber's massive doors exploded inward. The gathered representatives of the galaxy's most powerful species found themselves. The Imperial Council chamber had become a courtroom, its marble floors now stained with the blood of security guards who had tried to protect their masters. Emperor Valdris sat in his ornate throne, no longer the supreme ruler of the galaxy but a prisoner facing judgment for crimes against entire species. "Broadcasting to all Imperial worlds and free territories," announced Sarah Hendricks from the chamber's communication console. "The people of the galaxy are about to learn the truth about their benevolent empire." James stood before the assembled leaders, many of whom he recognized from his years of Imperial service. Some looked defiant, others terrified, and a few seemed almost relieved that their secrets were finally being exposed. "Operation Final Solution," James began, his voice carrying clearly through the broadcast systems. "Biological weapons disguised as medical treatments designed to sterilize the human population across hundreds of worlds. The systematic murder of an entire species planned and approved by the beings you see before you." Emperor Valdris tried to maintain his dignity even in defeat. "Humanity was a threat to galactic stability. We prevented a war that would have killed millions. By committing genocide against children." Tommy's voice echoed through the chamber as he stepped out from behind the communication console. The 12-year-old boy looked small among the alien dignitaries, but his presence sent shockwaves through the assembled leaders. "Impossible," whispered Admiral Vex. "The conditioning protocols were perfect. The boy should have no memory of his human identity." Tommy walked slowly toward the Emperor, his young face showing a maturity that no child should possess. "I remember everything now. The lies you told us, the way you tried to make us hate ourselves for being human. But mostly I remember the other kids who didn't get rescued." The broadcast was reaching billions of viewers across the galaxy, many of whom were learning for the first time about the Empire's true policies. On worlds where species had been peacefully integrated, populations began to realize that their missing dissidents and disappeared. Children had been systematically eliminated. Dr. Yates approached the Emperor with a data tablet containing evidence gathered from destroyed research facilities, psychological conditioning protocols for 47 different species, sterilization programs targeting genetic lines deemed problematic, cultural elimination strategies designed to erase the heritage of entire civilizations. "We brought order to chaos," protested Director Corval. "The galaxy was consumed by constant warfare before Imperial unity." "You brought slavery disguised as peace," James replied. "And you made the mistake of thinking no one would fight back." The evidence was overwhelming. Years of carefully documented atrocities, presented to a galactic audience that had believed they were living under a benevolent government. The Empire's propaganda machine had hidden the truth so effectively that even many Imperial citizens were shocked by the revelations. Emperor Valdris made one final attempt to justify his reign. Humans are a disease spreading conflict wherever they go. We offered you civilization and you chose barbarism. No, said a new voice from the chamber's entrance. You offered us extinction. Captain Maria Santos entered the chamber leading a group of human children who had been rescued from conditioning facilities across the galaxy. They ranged in age from 8 to 16, their faces showing the scars of psychological manipulation, but their eyes burning with determination. These are some of the survivors, James announced to the broadcast audience. Children who were stolen from their families and tortured in the name of Imperial science. They've asked to speak for themselves. One by one, the children stepped forward to give testimony about their experiences. They spoke of having their memories altered, their cultural identity erased, and their basic humanity questioned by researchers who saw them as experimental subjects rather than people. They told us that our parents didn't love us, said Lisa Chen, a 10-year-old girl from the Alpha Centauri colonies. They said humans were monsters who abandoned their children. But my mom used to read me stories every night, and my dad taught me to paint. The emotional impact of the children's testimony was devastating. Across the galaxy, species who had remained neutral began demanding answers from their imperial governors. The Empire's carefully constructed image of benevolent leadership crumbled as the reality of their methods became undeniable. But the broadcast was more than just an exposé of imperial crimes. James had prepared for this moment, and he had a proposal that would reshape the galaxy's political structure. The Empire claims to represent unity and peace, he announced, but true unity cannot be built on fear and oppression. Today we offer an alternative. The Declaration of Free Species was read aloud to the galactic audience, outlining principles of voluntary cooperation, cultural preservation, and mutual defense against tyranny. Dozens of worlds had already signed the document, forming the foundation of a new galactic confederation based on cooperation rather than conquest. Emperor Valdris laughed bitterly. You think you can replace 1,000 years of imperial order with pretty words? The galaxy needs strong leadership, not democratic chaos. The galaxy needs to choose its own destiny, Tommy replied, his young voice cutting through the Emperor's cynicism, and we're going to give it that choice. The coup was already spreading beyond Valdris Prime. Resistance cells throughout. Imperial space were seizing control of government facilities and broadcasting the truth to their local populations. Imperial governors who had participated in atrocities found themselves facing angry crowds of citizens who had believed they were serving a just cause. Some imperial worlds chose to fight, rallying their forces to preserve the old order. But many more chose freedom, joining the growing confederation of species that refused to be ruled by fear. James watched his son coordinate with resistance leaders across the galaxy, the boy's natural intelligence enhanced by the leadership skills he was rapidly developing. Tommy had been forced to grow up too quickly, but he was growing into someone who could help build a better galaxy. What happens now? Asked Dr. Yates as Imperial security forces throughout the capital began surrendering to resistance fighters. Now we do the hard work, James replied. Winning the war was the easy part. Building something better will take generations. Emperor Valdris and his inner circle were taken into custody, facing trial for crimes against multiple species. But James knew that removing the Empire's leaders was only the beginning. The real challenge would be helping billions of citizens adjust to life without the authoritarian structure that had defined their existence for centuries. As the resistance fleet prepared to leave Valdris Prime, James found himself standing with Tommy on the observation deck of their flagship. The boy was reading messages from human colonies that were finally free to speak their own language and practice their own customs. Dad, do you think things will really be different now? Tommy asked. James put his arm around his son's shoulders, noting how much taller the boy had grown in recent months. I think we've given the galaxy a chance to be different. What they do with that chance is up to them. In the distance, other ships were departing Valdris Prime, carrying representatives from dozens of species back to their homeworlds. They carried with them the seeds of a new kind of civilization, one built on cooperation rather than conquest. The empire that had tried to erase humanity was gone. In its place, something new was beginning to grow, shaped by the determination of a father who had refused to let his son be stolen, and the courage of a boy who had survived attempts to destroy his identity. The galaxy would face new challenges and new conflicts, but it would face them as free beings choosing their own destiny, and somewhere in the vast expanse of space, human children would grow up knowing that their heritage was something to be proud of, not something to be erased. The Shadow War was over. The work of building lasting peace had just begun.